Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's good to see each and every one of you.
It's good to see you.
So, I have some wild, esoteric thoughts in my heart this morning. We will see if I can ground the swirl to bring up something practical for you. So last week we were talking about angels, and we were talking about gilgulim, because we got into that kind of distinction between permanent angels, impermanent angels, and the idea of angelic beings in gilgulim, reincarnations, transmigrations also. And in the middle of it, we brought up ivurim, impregnations of soul. And I actually want to talk about gilgulim, reincarnations, and ivurim, impregnations a bit. Because in Kabbalah, this speaks deeply to mysteries of soul and mysteries of self. And it's an enormous subject of divine assistance, divine intervention in the process of our tikkun, our rectification, our realization of how souls deeply help one another in a process of realization or rectification. And angels too. So this gets kind of interesting. Let's just talk about potentials, possibilities of ivurim. So here we are in a gilgul, an incarnation, meant to rectify, realize nefesh, or ruach, or neshama, one of these three aspects of the soul that deal with incarnation. And this is our work and why we have come. There are conditions in which all three can be rectified in a given life, realized in a given life. Oftentimes, one is a focus, whether that be nefesh or ruach or neshama. And it's very interesting. In any incarnation, it's possible for the full realization of the soul, but it doesn't mean it's probable. Hey, with the Holy One, anything is possible. Probable deals with karmic continuum, and conditions that we are encountering in life. And obviously, in the midst of a life, there are all kinds of conditions, auspicious and inauspicious, and this deals with probability. But yes, and behind there's always this possibility of a thunderbolt enlightenment, this full realization, reintegration of the soul with the One. But of course, we're dealing in realms of probabilities. And so, yes, there are these obstructions, so on, that may impede us. Left to our own devices, we could be going through an awful lot of incarnations before the full rectification of this or that part of soul. And then we would have all those incarnations of the rectification of this other aspect of the soul, and so on. Yes, but there is intervention by way of the Spirit of God and by way of heaven, by Tzaddikim and angels and souls of higher grade that very much engage in ivurim, sending forth aspects or sparks of aspects of their souls into other souls, impregnating them, so as to uplift them, strengthen them, and help them through transitions and barriers, and help them engage in rectification. Sometimes in an extremely reciprocal movement, in which one engaging in an ivur, greater or lesser ivur, I'll explain this in a minute, is progressing too, as they're helping another soul. And they need to accomplish certain rectifications as well. And so there they are, and they merge with, and off they go. And both are uplifted in the movement. Other times, greater Tzaddikim, not quite reciprocal in that way, in the sense that the soul's already rectified, realized, and has merged literally to uplift into similar grade to help complete this rectification, this realization in another soul. So there are all these dances, meaning there are gradations of these ivurim. There are all these dances. Now, what's a greater ivur? Well, a greater ivur is when a tzaddik or a soul of a higher grade actually sends a full aspect of their soul into another soul, merging with the corresponding aspect. Meaning, in one body you can have two nefeshim. You could have this merging of the nefesh of a tzaddik or a soul of a higher grade with another soul. Somewhere in life enters this aspect of soul, merging with aspect of soul. They're joined, and there they go. And that may last for more or less duration. Somewhere in life entering, and somewhere before death releasing and departing. That's called a greater ivur, because it's a full aspect of the soul that merges and enters, taking up that walk. There are also lesser ivurim, which are more measured, meaning sparks of soul, sparks of aspects. So a greater ivur, well, the full knowledge and power of ruach would be added to ruach, or nefesh to nefesh, or neshama to neshama in a person. With a spark, some of the knowledge and power, specific knowledge and power, would be added, if you're feeling it. And so the word ivur always indicates somewhere after birth the impregnation, and somewhere before death, if just before, the release. That's ivurim. Otherwise it would be a gilgulim. And yes, that does happen. That is where, at the outset, from just before birth, or just right around birth, aspect of soul of a tzaddik or soul of higher grade merges with a soul incarnating, and so incarnates with them. When this happens, that merger will exist until death. Meaning, really, this other soul has taken up incarnation with another, and is literally living that life with them and helping them through the entirety of it. So you have these assistances. And this can get interesting because there can be numerous assistances going on like this, numerous interventions throughout an incarnation. Think on this. It would be possible, for example, for a soul to walk with the neshama of one tzaddik, the ruach of another, and the nefesh of another merged with their three aspects of soul and incarnation. In the middle of this, completely capable of receiving all kinds of sparks of various tzaddikim and angels in various movements as they go through life. It gets interesting. It gets very interesting. Also, if you're listening to this, this is something very interesting about so-called self. This person in this life. You know, we like to think of self in this very, well, bluntly put, egoistic and very limited way, that we have this fixed static self, and that's the self. We even think of reincarnations and incarnations often in this way. People will talk, you know, here will be Betty, and Betty will think about having been Janice and the previous incarnation and so and literally think that there's this one self. Really? Because all of our experience in the Kabbalah says differently. It says souls are intimately interconnected, interwoven, and interpenetrated. It teaches us that self is a co-arising of influences always. I know that's not to say there aren't distinct soul streams with these distinct aspects of soul in a process of tikkun, of rectification, realization, of healing and enlightenment. Oh, there are. But there's all these exchanges between souls. And this gets interesting. Now, it may be that for many, if they have come to rectify, realize nefesh, if they were to rectify and realize nefesh, they would have to die and be born in another life to go on to rectify ruach. That is very often true here. Very much so. Yeah, but in the meanwhile, you know, if nefesh is rectified, and with a person of faith, they could very well draw on the ivurim of a ruach of a tzaddik, or the help of an angel. If that went along in full union, perhaps even neshama, and so be accessing something of ruach and neshama in this way. That's possible. If the individual is a passionate person of faith, driving deep in a worship of God in spirit and truth, deep in prayer and in meditation, haven't received light transmission, this anointing, they could conceivably nevertheless access and rectify ruach, and access and rectify neshama. There are actually ways in which they can bind their soul to the bundle of light, to the Holy One, fully returning an aspect of the soul, and so actually move forward, even though the focus was upon nefesh, and that's accomplished. Even though most often a soul will have to reincarnate to move into the work of the next aspect of soul. This is entirely possible, and it all depends on faith and love. It all depends on the interior life. And of course, in Mashiach, there's this radical play between law, probability, and grace, possibility. And we have this whole capacity to change probability, to put it into flux, so that we can experience greater possibilities and greater leaps in the evolution and realization of the soul. And this isn't just isolate to this play of Zadokine and souls of the faithful and spiritual. Realize that souls do have a tendency to help one another. And I will add, not always towards the good. So this merging in Gilgal and incarnation and this exchange of sparks, this is a universal principle between souls. Language, a lot of people talk about karmic connections. Wonder what those are. And I wonder what's happening as we come close to one another, just in incarnations in the midst of Gilgal, exchanging sparks, energy of soul, taking on energy and knowledge and power from one another. So this becomes interesting. You have heard the teaching that in Shabbat, if Shabbat is fully remembered and kept, there's a possibility of a double portion of soul. So like if normally I'm working with Nefesh, perhaps on Shabbat might experience Ruach, or normally working with Nefesh Ruach might experience Neshama. Yes, indeed. It's part of the grace and wisdom of Shabbat, of going deeper in prayer, meditation, contemplation. Also, do you suppose a time of ivurim, where ivurim might be received? Yes, very much so. How about movements of a prayer circle or ceremony like high rides, outer or inner continuum? Moments of potential ivurim? Say, we're coming up to the feast most associated in the year of drawing in ivurim. Well, the feast of Mother and Child and Divine Incarnation. You wouldn't suppose that esoterically within and behind that are these secret ways of intentionally drawing in ivurim for new manifestations in life, would you? Reasons to discuss this is because the more that mind and heart is open to such things, the more in prayer and meditation we can actually draw in ivurim, having intention, having cleaving, having invocation in the Spirit of God for various helps to move forward to do greater works. This is one of the ways, that the Spirit gives gifts, spiritual gifts. Yeah, there's the direct manifestation of the Spirit and spiritual gifts with the soul, but also ivurim, sometimes acquiring a gift. One is acquired in ivurim, a spark. So if not in one soul root, still from a soul of another root that does bear that gift. It gets interesting. So I kind of wanted to swat the fire and watch the sparks and the campfire fly up and see where some of those sparks land and swirl with you. So I'll pause there. See what this is stirring in you.
I hear Yeshua is teaching forgiveness all over gospel, letting it go, looking forward, looking through. What is happening in forgiveness in light of the exchange of sparks?
Well, first of all, let's look at this word and break it up. Forgiving. An intention to give, right? Is forgiveness all about letting go simply of harm done or hurt feelings, so on? Is that the only mode of forgiveness? Or does forgiveness really run much deeper than that? What if forgiveness has a lot to do with letting go of self? Of fixed identity? For oneself and others? What if forgiveness has to do with a greater openness? Greater possibility? What if it has to do with creating a flux in probability? Or I'm breaking out of how I'm defining everything for a while and leaving it all in the one. But interestingly enough, forgiving, giving of oneself, giving of one's soul, gee, that sounds a lot like the intention of ivurim.
Right.
So this principle of forgiveness that Yeshua is speaking so much runs so much further than we initially hear. Initially, we're hearing letting go of the sins of others, the harm others have caused us. A lot of times we're hearing that. But there are all these other layers. So yeah, self-offering, the giving of oneself, and the giving of one's light and life freely. Also, in greater ivurim, and certainly in gilgulim, merging aspect of soul, one is very directly taking up the experience of another and something of the karma of another.
Mm-hmm.
Self-offering.
I felt such a powerful rush, even with one deceased, when there was finally a pop in forgiveness years ago. And I was certain that something entered in when I forgave, when I finally had the capacity to let go. So there's like this rush, there's this push of wind behind me into life. Very different, very far forward.
Well, do you suppose that there are positive and negative exchanges of sparks? That sometimes negative karmic connections, a spark of our soul gets imbued in another soul, and until there is release, until there is forgiveness, that spark doesn't come back. And at the same time, we're holding a spark of that soul, and that in the moment of forgiveness, in this context, there's the release of those sparks returning to those souls, freeing one another from that negative karmic connection.
Yes.
Everything that we can say in the positive also may happen in the negative with us. Like just last weekend we were talking about angels that incarnate as human beings. It must also be true of demons. No, that's not a subject we want to go on much about. We just assume everyone knows. If you say this, you have said this. and those with knowledge can draw their conclusions. So, yeah.
It strikes me that what came forward very strongly as I was hearing this, wait a minute, all this, am I hearing correctly to hear that all this depends upon soul and essence being empty, these mergers, this an emptiness that somehow conveys and is radiant of some kind? Because I'm hearing strongly this, that soul must have a kind of spaciousness and emptiness to it for any of these mergers or receiving a spark and the spark itself. There's something of the emptiness, or I don't know if belly ma is appropriate in this context, but
Well, belly ma, without what? Or without essence, proper translation, meaning who can discern the essence, right?
okay.
But this is the truth of ein or nothingness, emptiness. We're not really saying nothing. We're saying nothing. Not something, not nothing. Because you can't say what it is. In essence. But the essence is known through this radiance. The essence is known through action, through manifestations. Otherwise it is not known. And its potential is infinite, this essence, right? Also in terms of souls. Souls are light. Souls are spirit. Not quite so solid like these physical bodies. You know? It's like in light body. Oh, we can merge completely. Just as in soul. In a physical body, well, the nearest people come to that is, sex. A certain powerful moment. But never do the bodies really, physically, completely, fully, entirely merge, only apart. But not in soul, and not in light body. And soul can completely melt and join. Absolutely so. Yes. So, a subtler manifestation, soul, we may also say consciousness, or mind. This being said, do you suppose any moment of any gradation of light transmission has something of a play of ivurim going on? Just like, what's a mind-to-mind, heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul transmission? What's this? Some sort of merging, even if for a moment, and that's the communication of knowledge and power? Because then something of that knowledge and power remains, that experience, shared. So you turn a bunch of lights on in a room and you have a field of light. It all merges.
Exactly as this, like a candle. There's might be two distinct sources, but
But now put those two
one light.
flames together, and you get a bit bigger flame.
Yeah. And as it fills the room, it's one large light. So yeah, I'm kind of hearing this. Yet the source of this soul light can't be found. Yeah.
Yeah, everywhere and nowhere, huh?
Yeah.
Everywhere and nowhere to be found.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So something very different, in a lot of exoteric religion, the way soul's talked about, it's like some sort of thing you put in a jar. And there's this one and there's that one, and it's all very linear. But that's not how mystics really speak of soul. In that linear model, no wonder people think that there's them and there's God, right? And the twain don't really meet. No wonder. Because it's this whole way of thinking of this fixed or static self and soul, rather than realizing something much more subtle and sublime, much more beautiful, much more multidimensional, much more interconnecting, interpenetrating, interdependent, interrelated, and this being soul. Yeah. not a glowing object in a bottle.
There's a connection that's kind of trying to swirl, but it's not quite there. I'm wondering if it relates. In the gospel, we hear a story and it circles around the day of judgment and the separation between the sheep and the goats.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeshua saying, you know, when I was hungry, you thought to give me food, or you didn't. When I was naked, you thought to give me clothing, or you didn't. And he puts himself in all of these.
Everybody
Yes.
saying what you're doing to these, you do to me.
I'm wondering if, in a way, that's pointing to this mystery. And he's pointing to that as he is in these, so we can say Zadakim and so many others.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again and again in Yeshua's teachings, there are pointing outs of this deep interconnection and inseparability of all of us inwardly. If we all emanate from one source, this eternal God, Yahweh Elohim, we are all in the one. We're all emanations of the one. Then it would stand to reason that on every level we're deeply interconnected and interpenetrating one another. So this separation of radical separation of self and other is actually delusional, is false. Now, it's not saying there aren't unique individuals, that there's not that diversity of the unique one in this immeasurable, infinite emanation of countless beings. Yes, and yet, all are the one. And Yeshua knows this. Because the realization he's embodying is conscious union, oneness with the supernal one, the infinite and eternal. And then speaking of how to enter this realization. And he's saying, well, first, by faith. Begin to love one another as I love you, in which you are me and I am you, and it is not. Your good is my good. First in faith, and then perhaps engaging in this. And gee, this sounds a lot like rectification of a nefesh, of just basic goodness here, and treating one another as he's speaking about. Yeah. So engage in this, and all of a sudden maybe one will start seeing Mashiach or God within everyone and everything. First, faith, hearing that gospel and doing the gospel, and then maybe one will truly hear and truly see, which would have a deep aspect to the rectification of Ruach. When more and more there's this knowledge, this awareness. In the middle of that, I suppose one will start launching into various gradations of nearness, oneness, like one soul in the one soul, one's soul merging with the soul of God, as it were. It sounds like rectifications. Neshama? Feeling?
Yeah.
So yes, very much he's speaking to it.
In our tradition, we're very much emphasizes one is learning the way conscious movement through transitions, and usually with emphasis on intentionality and then bringing to fruition and release, as I heard in the discourse too. Can we compare this power of conscious initiation and specifically resolution toward what might be like Yeshua says, like a cleaning out of the cup or a making room, a way that resolution seems to both release and create new space for new movements. It seems a big part of this, what we're speaking about in some regards to our work.
It is, and what if revolution is coming to a place of wishing to uplift, of wishing to empower, sort of the win-win, wishing to be uplifted and wishing to uplift, and that's resolution. Because when we don't bring to resolution, we're kind of wanting to hold down, right? Or cast down and keep everything in this state. Versus resolution, which says we're ready to move on. Let's move on. Let's move up. Right? Now think about this whole wisdom of ivurim. Well, if I'd like to receive assistance by way of ivurim, maybe I want to walk with the idea of, gee, and I'd like to help others be uplifted as I can. Anytime we want to attract to us, resemblance is always good. Which means, well, I begin that very action, giving what I wish to receive. Holding that kind of thought and speech and action in situations in my life. So bringing to resolution is opening to a new view, a new vision of what's possible between us and others. And doing what we can to move towards that new vision, that new possibility between us. That's resolution. And that's forgiveness. New relationship. It's kind of like in families. Sometimes there are simple recognitions. Sometimes we really are so different from one another. Like strangers, virtually. Even though we share the same genes and blood, we can be strangers. Oh, no wonder we vibe so much with one another. Didn't understand one another. Might never in this life, but we can love one another. Now there's a new vision, right? Because a lot of struggling in families, for example, is trying to get everyone to accept everything you say in your view. And they're kind of coming from the same angle. What's wrong with you? I've known you all your life, instead of, maybe we're really just that different and it's okay. And actually we don't have to agree or see everything the same way at all. But we can love one another. It's funny, in a resolution like that, what can happen in a relationship. Where actually there's a relaxing, a letting go, and there's some love, and there's some healing, and on you go. I think that's a common example in our experience, if we can get there to see that sometimes. Maybe we're not supposed to be like one another and understand one another all the time. It's a novel thought, isn't it?
So when you say ivurim, do you mean emerging?
Ivurim means impregnation, literally. So an ivur means something entering in or merging. Yes, because that's the entering in terms of soul. It's not like there's a soul and inside that soul there's this other soul, you know, like soul in the jar thing. It's more like, no, it melds, it merges when there's an impregnation. And you can think about it too in terms of the conception of a child, where actually the elements of father and mother completely merge as an entity, literally, that then grows this new life. That's why they use the word ivur or impregnations. It's like that, of two things coming together that actually generate a whole manifestation together. And pretty interesting. Just as there are ways of drawing in higher soul gradation in the play of going to sleep and dream unit, or think of individuals who have near-death experiences. For some of them, it's very life-changing. You get a sense of, ooh, you came back with a lot more soul, didn't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of happens sometimes. It's interesting. But my point is it's not so far removed from us either. This is very important to understand, that this is happening. Very likely some of this is already occurring in you. The point being, how wonderful to become more conscious so as to open to an even greater play of this with you and with others. And walk with that awareness. Why not? And walking up to this holy feast, why not intend perhaps to receive an ivur to help you give birth to what you wish to give birth to for the world through this feast and into the coming year. That little thing we're carrying. I think I shall leave you with that thought. Until another time, may you remember the divine presence that manifests before you, within and all around you, and as you. My love to you, may the peace and grace of our Yahweh Adonai go with you. May you go in the spirit of Yahweh. Zakor Shalom.
Shalom.